Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Euphoric, the podcast. I'm here with Jen Richardson. Jen, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Jen. Thank you very much for having me. I'm a registered holistic nutritionist. I am a mood coach and a deliberate cold exposure facilitator.
Well, I can't wait to get to know you better and really understand how you got into all of that. I think that's really interesting. And then really dive into the cold exposure, because I think that is something that I've experimented with a lot and I think has so many benefits to people. So I can't wait to learn from an expert about what that really looks like and means. But before we go into that, tell us a little bit of like, how did you get into this work? Did you have your own kind of healing story? What kind of propelled you to want to help people change their mental states and their lives in this way?
Yeah, I do definitely have my own story. I am also sober. So when I started teaching about food, it was about food and mood and mental health. That kind of took me down the path of the nervous system and how we can support it. And then I met a great group of people that were going into the lake in the wintertime here in Ontario, which is very cold. So the main thing that I noticed, especially because I was early to sobriety at that time, was what it did for my mood and my mental health, and specifically my dopamine. I think that as a recovering addict, we chase dopamine a lot, and it really helped out balance my mood. And then, most importantly, and what I teach my clients now is resiliency and trying to sit within that uncomfortable feeling and become more resilient to stress.
Yeah, yeah. So in your opinion, do you think that not being able to regulate our nervous system and like kind of sit with that stress, as most of us just don't learn how to do that as we're growing up, do you think that like is the one of the reasons why we kind of look for things outside of us, whether it's alcohol or food or drugs, to kind of soothe ourselves in some way?
I do think that is definitely bang on. I also think that I mean, we all know now, or most of us know now, that there's physical benefits to deliberate cold exposure. But what I think that we don't talk about enough is the mental benefits of it. And yes, there's the raise in the dopamine and the norepinephrine and stuff like that. But for me, and what I do with my clients is sitting in an uncomfortable space, because when you do that, emotions do start to arise, especially if you're already living in a fight or flight state or in a stress state. These things start to come up. And I think it's another beautiful way to heal and another beautiful way to express our emotions.
Yeah, yeah. And so let's do a little one-on-one. So for someone who doesn't know what cold exposure or cold immersion is, what is the practice of it? Do you have to do it in like a freezing lake? Are there any other ways to do it? Can you do it in your shower? So like what constitutes cold exposure in your estimation?
So I would say you can do it in a few different ways, especially when you're getting started. The shower is a great place to start. Um, but I do have people that start with even just getting a cold bowl of water with ice in it and splashing it on their face, walking in bare feet for a little bit in the snow on your back deck, whatever it is. Even if you're very afraid to get started, walking outside in the wintertime with a tank top on, whatever it is, like exposing yourself to the cold, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so what have you found are like the physical benefits of doing that? Like why does that serve a human body?
I would say because mostly inflammation in the body, definitely aches and pains. I do have people, clients that come and see me for physical benefits. And mostly it is like back pain, inflammation in the body, even but gut stuff, hormones. For women, I would say plunging every day is definitely not something that we should be doing every day. We have different bodies than men. We have more what they call brown fat stores. And when we sit in the tub and our vagus nerve is activated, our brown fat is increased, which is our good fat, which is great. But we have different bodies than men, obviously. And we just need to pay a little bit more attention to when we're doing it, and if we're in our cycle, before or after, and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So is there an ideal time in our cycle that you would recommend doing more cold exposure?
I would say, like, when you're sensitive, to not be doing it. So it just kind of depends on everyone's body. Like, if I had a client that said that they wanted to sit in cold water to help them mentally, but they were on their period, I might say, go ahead and do it, because it's helping them emotionally. Maybe it's helping them get through something that's extremely significant to them. So yeah, I mean, if your body's feeling sensitive, if you're not getting warm when you're like quickly when you're getting out of the tub, and those kind of things, I would say maybe take a couple days off. But other than that, I would just say, like, if your body's feeling sensitive, crampy, you don't have a lot of energy, I wouldn't be getting into the tub as a woman.
Yeah, yeah. So I read that like it really helps with the way our arteries like constrict and then contract, which is really good for our cardiovascular health. Can you explain that phenomenon a little bit more? Like, what does the cold exposure do?
Yeah, sure. So that happens right when we get in, and when we go into fight or flight. And I always like to say, like, sit nice and deep so that our vagus nerve is kind of like in the water, sitting underneath the water line. And that's when our the restricting and expanding is happening, because we're moving from parasympathetic state to like our rest and digest. So lots of things are happening in this time. That's when the shortness of breath is happening. It's like the first 30 seconds you're in that fight or flight. Um, the constricting and dilating is happening. Our metabolism is going through the roof. Like, all of the good stuff is happening kind of in the first 30 seconds. Metabolism is boosting by like 500%. They say up to 500%. The dopamine is 250. So yeah, that's all happening like kind of in the beginning of the first 30 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's been studies to show that when you do it over like a long period of time, then it like there's all these other benefits that happen, right, too.
Yeah, there's many benefits that happen when you do it over a long period of time. And like, obviously, the more you do it, the longer you can sit, the longer you can push and test your resiliency. We build a membrane when we're sitting in the water. So like moving your arms and legs. When we go into fight or flight, like all of our blood rushes to our organs and to our heart to kind of save our life, because our body doesn't know the difference between us sitting in a cold tub or being chased by a bear. So those are the kind of things that we're kind of teaching our body, that we are safe. Although these kind of physical reactions are happening in our body, we can kind of calm ourselves, control our breath.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm curious if you've ever heard this. If you're from a cold like area in the world, my parents are from Poland, so also very cold, probably similar latitude. And they kind of grew up with this like wives' tale that the cold makes you sick, and that like a child or like you had your back exposed or your midriff exposed or something, and it was cold, that like you're gonna get sick, and it's kind of this like bad thing, to like not get cold. So I'm curious, like, do you know where that kind of mentality came from? And is that completely like debunked? Or are there some times when we shouldn't be getting too cold, or too long, for example? Like, do we have to build up a tolerance to it? Because I get the cold plunge is one thing, right? To like just do that for like a minute or two. But like then you mentioned also like going outside in like a t-shirt, which to my parents would just be like, what are you talking about? You're gonna get pneumonia or something. So anything about that?
Yeah, so here we do a lot of contrast therapy where I work, and a lot of people ask this question. Like, for example, when your hair is wet, that's another old wives' tale, right? Definitely the cold is boosting our cold shock proteins, which is coming from our liver. That's boosting our immune system. So I would go ahead and say that that's an old wives' tale for sure. But like, it's a virus that makes us sick. It's not the cold that makes us sick, but again, you would have to listen to your body. Like, if you had a fever or something like that, I definitely wouldn't be encouraging somebody to get into the tub. But overall, one of the best ways to boost our immune system is to sit in the cold. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And what have you seen, like, especially for people who come maybe with anxiety or depression, like what have you been able to see? You mentioned like these incredible neurochemicals being released, but have you been able to see like the big difference, like before and after of like how people are really able to change their mental state over time using this practice?
Yeah. So that's my favorite part. My company is called Cold Community North, and here I say surrender, release, and regulate. So surrender to the cold, release what no longer serves you, and regulate your nervous system. And mostly everything is based on the mental and emotional here. So when you do sit and in the tub and you do have that emotional release, and you do find that you're safe and you can kind of regulate your own breath, your anxiety in daily life starts to kind of subside. And things that are hard for you, I hear this with moms a lot. They don't get triggered as quickly, or things that were like, life is still hard, but they're able to push through. Their resiliency has become stronger, or they don't react as quickly. And I think that that's definitely one thing we can learn from the water. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned contrast therapy earlier. So I'm guessing that means the hot and the cold, the difference.
Yeah.
Tell us about the benefits of that, and then like how would we design that for ourselves at home, or like, for example, I don't have a sauna or a cold plunge right now, so I definitely like use that whenever I go to spas or something, or if I'm on a retreat, but I don't really have like a setup here at home. So I'm just curious, like, how can we get into the contrast therapy? And then what does that do when we do that back and forth? And how much would you recommend to do it? Just anything about that.
Yeah, so contrast therapy, one of my faves. I like to say that the sauna is for the body and the tub is for the mind. And we here start and end on cold, because I like to suggest that bringing the benefits of the cold with you will be amazing. So, number one, sleep. They say that a hot bath to fall asleep, but a cold bath to stay asleep. So if you finish on cold, you're able to like kind of get into that REM sleep a little bit faster and deeper. They're now showing studies that melatonin is being produced when you're in the tub, when at first they were saying to only do it in the morning because you would be like a little bit worked up. So on to contrast therapy. So we start and end on cold. And you're starting in the tub for about 2 minutes, and then getting out, no towel, walking into the sauna. The benefits in there, I would say, mostly specifically like lymphatic drainage, inflammation, sweating out all of the toxins. You want to kind of go as extreme as you can take it in there. So as hot as you can take it, and then as cold as you can take it. And then coming out of the sauna, probably, I would say 7 to 10 minutes. And then standing for about a minute just to get acclimated to the weather around you, especially here in the winter time, getting back into the tub, followed with the sauna, and then ending on the tub again. So like I said, yeah, the sauna is a little bit more for the body, and the tub is to kind of like push your resiliency and strengthen the mind.
Okay. And if someone like didn't have access to these things, or it's just far to get to, could you do this in the shower, or how would you do it at home?
You can do it with water temperatures, like even hot tubs, bathtub. Like maybe if you had 2 tubs in the house, you could do one hot, one cold. You could definitely do that. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. That's like awesome. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
so curious, like, how does this make a big difference in your life? Like, what has, you mentioned that you got into cold immersion just about that time that you got sober. And so, like, what has been this for you? Like, how has this changed your mental state, your mood, your ability to handle resilience? Like, personally, how has this influenced you in your life?
I have to honestly say, I'm not sure that I would still be sober if I didn't have deliberate cold exposure in my life. Only because, I mean, this is my attachment. We all have our things. This is where I express myself. Some days I can sit for 2 minutes, some days I can sit for 13. I definitely find that it's a place where I can let go. If I have to cry, I cry. If not, like I can just sit there and find a meditative state. It also brings me to a place of extreme presence. Like nothing is going to make you more present than sitting in like 0 degree or 1 degree water, right? And then obviously like the benefits of the mood, especially dopamine in the beginning, was a big one for me. And then there's no crash. So like with sex and drugs, alcohol and all that kind of stuff, there's this raise in dopamine, and then there's a crash, which for some people can be like hell, right? And then with cold exposure, it just kind of fades out, but it can last up 2 to 3 days. Like it can last for quite a while. It's one of the biggest feedbacks I get, especially when someone's starting to get sober, just how good they feel for days after. It's not just like that hour or that night. It's like for days after. So yeah, and for me, I had sober time and then didn't, and then had it again, and then try to, like, I had to keep coming back. And when I tried cold exposure, I've been sober ever since. So I like to just spread the emotional mental health awareness around it. And I think it's great for addicts, or for people who are trying to get sober. I think that the emotions that we hold on to make us sick, and they can manifest into mental disease, physical disease. And if you can find a way to express it, I think this is a wonderful way to release what's no longer serving you.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. So
Thank
what
you.
counts as cold exposure? Is there a certain temperature that you would recommend, like that really will make all these differences? Because like there's a huge extreme between like, 60-degree water and 30-degree water, right?
Yeah, yeah. Like, so in the beginning, they were saying, 3 degrees to like 6. And I think, like, if you go to a cold exposure house, like a spa where they have the extreme cold, that's usually where things sit, anywhere from like 3 to 7 degrees.
Okay.
But now more studies are coming out, like just tap water with no added ice, cold. So that would probably be anywhere from 10 to 15 degrees, is doing the exact same thing. So we don't need to be sitting in tubs of ice, and we don't need to be walking into frozen lakes. If you like that, that's great, but we definitely don't need it. We can be doing it at home, especially for people who maybe can't afford it or don't live close. It's a great way to experience cold exposure too, for the first time at home in your own company.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'll have to have my team do the Celsius conversion to Fahrenheit. But I
Oh,
used to,
right. Sorry.
I used to live in San Diego, and we had a pool that wasn't heated in the winter time. So the pool would get down to like maybe 55 degrees. So like whatever was the mean temperature of the night. And so my husband and I would go and do our cold exposure there and then get in the hot tub afterwards and kind of just go back and forth. But now we moved and now we have a pool, a community pool again, but they heat it during the winter. So it
Right,
defeats the
right.
purpose, right? But that was like a cool way that we did it. And then I'm curious as well, like what about timing? Like how long would make a difference in your mood? Is there like a goal to keep wanting to go longer eventually over time? Or, is there just science behind, just do a minute, just do 3 minutes? Like what's that perfect sweet spot?
So all of the benefits come at 2 minutes. But if I sat for 2 minutes and you sat for 10, you won't get more dopamine, let's say, or more norepinephrine, whatever the case may be. The benefits are the benefits. Um, some days I feel more called to sit a little bit longer, but I will say, when I see videos of people sitting for like 15 minutes or something like that, I think there is something to be said about ego getting involved a little bit. Um, and you have to be careful. You really do, because like hypothermia is a thing. And yeah, so, but overall, it's kind of a random number, but they say 11 minutes a week. So you can break that down however you want it, like 2 minutes and then three, or however you want it. But they say overall 11 minutes a week.
Yeah. And how often do you do it?
Yeah. So I would say like 4 or 5 times a week I do it. I have 4 tubs going here usually, and I host like little mini retreats. And yeah, I think deliberate cold exposure will be in my life always, whether it's a craze or not. It will definitely always be in my life.
Yeah. Oh, well, I love that. I am getting really excited to go back to it. I think like I mentioned, I had the pool. I've done it anytime like there's a spa. So if you live by a spa that might have saunas, they'll probably have a cold pool as well that you can do it,
Right.
hopefully. And then obviously there's these experiences out there. And then like Jen said, just even a cold shower can like, especially if you live in a place that has colder weather, that water is going to be pretty cold, I think, coming from the tap. So
I
that's a
agree.
that's a great way to do it. And then anything about stuff to look out for. So you mentioned hypothermia. Is like when should we be concerned about what any kind of signs that we might have that this isn't like this is too long or this is not good for us? And are there any other health conditions that you wouldn't recommend use cold exposure or just, something to look out for if you have X, Y, and Z?
I think if there's any heart issues at all, I wouldn't say you can't, but I would definitely say consult your doctor about it and just let them know that you're going to do it. I've also seen pregnant women doing it. I'm not sure that there's like a a ton of research behind it. I could be wrong. Or people who have circulation issues. So because the blood is rushing from your extremities, like your hands and your feet, and to your organs, sometimes there can be issues with getting the feeling back in your feet and in your hands. And then the shiver. I think so. The shiver, it's a very cool aspect of deliberate cold exposure because there's an emotional attachment to it. So they say that shiver is tied to trauma in the body. So it's a way to release, but there's a very fine line between shivering and hypothermia. So like with a lot of people who practice deliberate cold exposure all the time, the shiver is the goal. And it's a great place to be. That's where like the brown fat is coming in and the metabolism and all of that good stuff. But you want to make sure there's either like a sauna that you're getting to, or you're getting dry clothes on, or you're getting dry socks on your feet. You're not kind of standing and shivering for a really long time.
Yeah, yeah. So I know for me, like Wim Hof is who introduced cold exposure to me, and he has like a breathing technique and like a little like exercise thing that you do after you do cold exposure. So if you're not going to do contrast therapy, if you don't have like a sauna or a hot something to get into, do you recommend doing something to either prepare you to get into that cold water? And then also, do you recommend doing something to warm you up once you get out?
Yeah, we do things here like very similar to Wim, where like breath getting ready to get into the tub. And I like to do like a nice big audible sigh because it stimulates the vagus nerve. It also helps when people are sitting in the tub to just kind of scream it out as they sit, especially if it's your first timer. So breath, kind of releasing through voice. And then after, I always say like squats, movement, get that blood flow going. When we have mini retreats here, there's loud music playing, dancing, and so it's a good vibe. But definitely to keep moving for sure, especially if you're like on the side of the lake or something like that. You want to keep moving and get your toes in some dry socks.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a really fun experience to do it for a first time is like in a community like event like you host, because there's
Yeah.
I think a lot of adrenaline that comes with it too, and a lot of really doing something that you were scared of, doing something that freaked you out and that you didn't think you could do, and the feeling you get afterwards is like not only the cold exposure, it's also that feeling of like I'm Superwoman. Like I can't believe I just
Yeah.
did that.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I like, kind of what I was saying before. Like some of the moms will be like, okay, yesterday I sat in like an ice tub, so I can do anything today, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm super curious, Jen. Do you still get nervous like about going into like a cold bath? Is it still like,
Yeah, I definitely still get nervous and I still stall. Like, we all do this thing, I think, on our phones where it's like, oh, I'll just look one more minute, or I'll put another load of laundry on, or whatever the case may be. Yeah, I still get nervous and I still stall. I think that that's kind of what keeps me coming back to cold exposure too, because it's always different and that excitement and that rush is always there.
awesome. Well, I love this. This was such a good conversation. So many questions answered. If we wanted to learn more about cold exposure, are there any other books or resources that you would recommend for someone to learn more about this?
Yeah, like we have some really cool people doing cool things here in Ontario that I would love to tell you about. So there is a group called Unbounded, and you can check them out on Instagram under Stay Unbounded. Another wonderful ice kind of cold exposure community is Iceworks Bath Co. They are doing amazing things and building beautiful tubs and spreading the word about cold exposure. So those are my two fave groups.
Okay. Well, that just brought me to another question. What about that? I'm going to forget the name and not say it right, but that new technology or newer, is it called like crypto freezing or something where you go like
I
real
think
cold?
it's like
Cryo,
crypto,
yeah.
something like that. Yeah. So I have not tried that yet, but I have seen videos and it looks crazy. Have you tried it?
I think I'm too
Yeah.
terrified of that.
Oh, I will definitely try it, but I live a little bit outside of the city. I live in the country here, so I would have to go to the city to do something like that, but it looks awesome.
Yeah. Oh. And then last question is like, what have you learned or heard about this and longevity? So like, there's a lot of longevity hacks that are coming out now. We are learning so much more. The body's probably going to live a lot longer than it has in past generations because I think of all this like consciousness knowledge and also, medical advancements. So what does cold exposure have to do with longevity?
I would have to argue that it would be the reduction of stress. I
Mm.
think we're living in this like fight or flight kind of, we're all trying to just survive. Well, many of us are, right? Like just go, go, go. And I think that if you have a practice like this, or whether it be breathing, but something that's going to reduce stress in your life and you're going to be able to release, then I think that's like the secret recipe to not carry and yeah, not carry stress with you.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you for educating me and my audience. Where can people find you and learn more about you?
You can find me on Eat Zen with Jen on Instagram, and eatzenwithjen.ca is my website. So yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll be sure to include all that in the show notes below. And if you're getting inspired to get into your cold plunge or your cold shower, I know it's like the middle of winter for us, but what a cool time to actually like brave it and be like, we did it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I must say, thanks so much for having me. Like listening to your podcast has done a lot for like my sobriety journey, and I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. I'm just looking for my record button. I can't find it. Oh, there we go.